Good morning. It's Thursday the 30th of July and welcome to this month's meeting of Rother District Council's Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Brian Drayson, Chair of the committee. The committee is required to consider the applications before us today against national and local planning policies. Where policies appear to pull in different directions, members must apply their knowledge, experience and judgment to each to reach a balanced decision in the interests of the district as a whole. Although this meeting is held in public, it isn't a public meeting. However, the council does run a public speaking scheme which allows residents, applicants and other interested parties to speak on specific applications. Details of how that works can be found on the RDC website. We're joined in the chamber this morning by the following officers: Matthew Worsley, Development Manager; Paula Slynn, Planning Solicitor; Edwin Cork, Principal Planning Officer; and Catherine White, Assistant Planning Officer. And helping with the meeting itself, we have two officers from Democratic Services. We've got Julie Hollands, the Committee Secretary, and Eleanor Drew, who's looking after our webcast. Joining us online, we have a member of the committee, Councillor Cheryl Creasler, who can take full part in the debates, but as she's online, she cannot vote on anything or actually propose a motion. Right. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping points. Members of the chamber and online should make sure their microphones are on when speaking and off when they're finished, because it decides where the camera is pointing. Please speak clearly into the microphone so that when what you say can be heard. There is no need to face the person you're talking to. Just speak to the microphone. They, and more importantly, the recording will pick it up. There are no fire alarm tests planned for today. If the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest exit and reassemble in the front car park. And finally, please ensure that mobile phones are switched off or at least on silent. Thank you. And now on to the agenda itself. Item 1, do I have your authority to sign the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 25th of June 2026 as a correct record of the proceedings? Yes? Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence and substitutes. Julie.
So we have apologies from Councillor Groner and Councillor Mear, and Councillor John Barnes is standing in as substitute today for Councillor Groner. I've not heard anything, Chair, from Councillor Gordon, so I don't know if he's coming today or not.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, I don't believe there's any additional agenda items.
No, there's none, Chair.
And 4, no withdrawn applications?
No, there's none.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is the disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures of members of disclosable or pecuniary interests or other registrable and non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda. Councillor Creasler.
Item 10 is an application from my son, and at that point I will be leaving the meeting.
Thank you. Any other declarations? No, thank you very much. Agenda item 6 is the Planning Applications Index. This document explains the Planning Committee procedures and shows on the final page the applications being considered by the committee today. For each application, the officer will first present their report to the committee. Then, if it is subject to the public speaking scheme, any registered speakers will be invited to address the committee for up to 5 minutes on their previous submission. The committee may then also hear comments from the ward councillors before asking questions of the officers on their report and the application in general. Members will then be invited to make any comments they may have before we proceed to a debate and a vote. Members of the committee understand that planning matters can be very emotive, especially for those directly affected by the outcome. Nevertheless, I would like to ask everyone within the chamber to remain calm and courteous throughout the meeting. Thank you. Right, moving on. Agenda item 7, which is application RR0/2026/0759/full. It's the address is 29, 31A and 31B Seabourn Road, Bexhill. It's a retrospective application for the demolition of existing dwelling and construction of 3 new detached family dwellings, including gardens, parking and access to Seabourn Road. The recommendation is it be resolved to grant planning permission. The case officer is Edwin Cork. The ward members, Councillor Delaney, who called the matter in, and I'll explain his reasons in a moment, and Councillor Clark, who is here today and will wish to address the committee. The reason for the call-in was summarise retrospective regularisation of non-compliant development, residential amenity, height, overlooking and outlook, surface water drainage and flood risk, biodiversity, scale, design and street scene. This application is subject to the public speaking scheme. Therefore, once the planning officer has presented his report and before we ask members of the officer, we will hear from the applicant and the ward councillor. Our members will then ask questions of the officer before proceeding. Edwin Cork is the officer, and Edwin will now present his report. Thank you, Edwin.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. An update sheet was circulated to members, and this summarised comments from a petition of objection and from 3 separate objections, and it also proposed amending the wording of conditions 2 and 4, which relate to obscure window glazing or film and obscure window film and cycle parking. Essentially, members saw on site on Tuesday that the obscure film had been applied to the windows and the cycle parking provision has already been provided within the storage areas at the back of the dwellings. Matt, could you show this first slide, please? This retrospective application relates to a development of 3 detached dwellings located on the northern side of Seabourn Road, close to the junction with Bishop's Walk. The site slopes down from south to north and previously contained a detached bungalow and single garage. There are 3 adjoining properties, 4 Bishop's Walk at a lower ground level to the north. Matt, can you go back to the previous slide, please? Sorry. Yep. 4 Bishop's Walk, which is at a lower ground level to the north, 33 Seabourn Road, which is to the east, and there is number 2 Bishop's Walk to the west. The surrounding residential area contains a mixture of bungalows, chalet bungalows and 2-storey houses on varying plot sizes. There is also a wide palette of materials on display. Matt, if you could go to the next slide, please. Since 2015, a succession of planning permissions have been granted for replacement of the original bungalow and garage with a development of 3 dwellings. These were initially approved as a terrace, but the 2 most recent permissions are for detached dwellings on the site. Both the approved schemes for detached dwellings are relevant to this current application, and the details of these developments are provided on pages 8 to 12 of the committee reports. And just on the screen is the first approved scheme for 3 detached dwellings. And this shows buildings that are just over 6 metres height at the front and just about 8.7 metres high at the rear. Okay, so that's on the right-hand side of the image. You can see the top image of the bungalows or houses is from Seabourn Road. The bottom is from the rear, where they're clearly higher. And you have the site plan on the left-hand side, which shows the relationship between the new dwellings themselves and the neighbouring properties on either side, as well as the relationship with Seabourn Road to the front. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Matthew? The subsequent permission for detached dwellings was granted as a variation to the previous scheme to allow for design and layout amendments to obtain a licence from Natural England for activities affecting badgers. That permission approved buildings up to 6.5 metres high at the front and up to 7.2 metres high at the rear. Each dwelling was approved with a raised decking area to the rear as well. So you can see on the right-hand image, this time round, the bottom image is the front of the dwellings facing onto Seabourn Roads, and the top image is the rear of the dwellings. And then again, the site plan on the left-hand side shows the relationship with neighbouring properties and the relationship with Seabourn Road and the actual relationship between the properties themselves. Again, if you want a clearer image, you can see those images in the committee report. Both permissions secure the creation of a badger biodiversity habitat area behind the rear garden of the dwellings and a badger run along the western boundary of the site, and members were able to see that at the site visit on Tuesday. We'll move on to the next slide, please, Matthew. Turning to the current proposal, a development of 3 detached dwellings has now been completed, but not in accordance with the drawings approved under the most recent permission. The main change relates to the height of the dwellings, which the applicant has previously advised came about because of not identifying the correct gradient of the site. There has also been an enlargement of the raised decking areas, a narrowing of the gaps between the dwellings, some changes to the fenestration, external materials palette, and hard and soft landscaping, and the addition of solar panels to the roofs. Details of the as-built dwellings are provided on pages 12 to 14 of the committee report. They are up to 6.7 metres high at the front and up to 8.2 metres high at the rear. And Matt, if you could just go through the next 3 slides, they're photographs of the as-built dwellings. So this is from Seabourn Road at the front. And you'll see the mixture of brick, weatherboard cladding, which is cream coloured, and slate roofs. If you can go to the next one, please, Matthew. This is the dwellings from the rear, from Bishop's Walk. And next slide, please, Matthew. And this, again, is from Bishop's Walk, but just shows you the context with the neighbouring property number 2 Bishop's Walk in terms of the position relative to the rear of that property. Okay. In terms of determining whether planning permission should be granted for the development that has been carried out, members were advised that the principle of constructing 3 detached dwellings on the site has already been established by the previous permissions. The main issues arising from the as-built development are determined to be impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on the amenities of the neighbouring properties, whether the development accommodates the reasonable expectations of likely occupiers in terms of indoor and outdoor space, and impact on biodiversity and wildlife. The committee report provides a detailed assessment of the as-built development in relation to each of these issues and considers other matters including surface water runoff, consistency in decision-making, and options available to local planning authorities to tackle breaches of planning control in a proportionate way. In terms of their height, scale, and materials, the as-built dwellings are effectively a hybrid of the dwellings approved under the 2 previous schemes. It is also the case that the site layout and relationship of the dwellings with neighbouring properties is broadly consistent with that previously approved. Where there is potential for harmful overlooking to occur, this has been mitigated by the installation of privacy screens to the decking areas and obscure film to side-facing windows. Turning to the needs of future occupiers, the gross internal floor space of the dwellings complies with the nationally described space standards, and adequate sized rear gardens have been provided. Each property benefits from 2 off-street car parking spaces, which meets the residual needs of the development for off-street parking. Elsewhere, and again as viewed on site, the Badger Biodiversity Habitat Area and Badger Run have both been created. Overall, the changes to the approved scheme have been considered on their individual merits, having regard to relevant planning policies and the specific site circumstances and local context. They are determined to be acceptable in relation to impacts on character and appearance of the area amenities of neighbouring properties and biodiversity wildlife. The development also meets the needs of future occupiers. It's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions detailed in the committee report and as amended by the update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. We now come to the public speaking section. We will hear from Cara Christie, the applicant, who has, as with all speakers, should not introduce any new information at this stage, and she will have 5 minutes to speak. If you'd like to come to the microphone, don't worry, we won't start the clock until you're ready.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Cara Christie and I am the applicant. Thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this application. I would like to draw attention to several important points. The development as built has lower ridge heights than those previously approved by the council, and this has been verified by an independent measured survey. In addition, the buildings have been moved further away from the neighbouring property, number 29, to accommodate a dedicated badger run, improving the relationship with neighbouring occupiers and supporting local wildlife. Members should also note that a previously approved scheme that was almost 9 metres high at the rear and would have been taller than the development that has ultimately been constructed. The current proposal therefore represents a reduction in both scale and visual impact when compared with one of the previously approved schemes. All external materials used were approved previously as per a discharge of conditions application. With regard to drainage, all surface water is directed to the front of the properties and discharged to the main surface water drain in Seabourne Road. Therefore, there is no increase in flood risk arising from the development as detailed in our drainage consultant's report. Southern Water, during the construction works, also had to sign off this connection in the road. We have the paperwork known as Section 106 confirming this. The homes themselves are highly energy efficient and have been designed with sustainability in mind, including solar panels with battery storage and electric vehicle charging points. They are EPC A rated, which means they are a highly sustainable building. We have also incorporated bird and bat boxes on the front and rear elevations of the gables and ensured that all external lighting is downward facing to minimise impacts on wildlife. We have provided 5 cycle storage spaces per dwelling in a locked and secure under terrace storage. The guidelines for this size of dwellings would be 2 per unit. Throughout the project, we have worked extensively with Natural England. Measures were put in place for the protection of wildlife, including the creation of a 7-metre wide wildlife corridor and arrangements for the 2 neighbours' complete new fencing and underground mesh protection for all 3 neighbours. We also carried out the safe translocation of slowworms to an off-site receptor location, which was a local vineyard. These works were carried out in consultation with and subsequently signed off by Natural England. It is also important to remember the condition of the site prior to development. This was a derelict, dangerous and unused site, and its redevelopment has brought significant environmental and visual improvements to the area. As conscientious developers, we have sought to support the local community throughout the construction process by employing local tradespeople, consultants, architects, estate agents and suppliers wherever possible, ensuring that the benefits of this development have been felt within the local economy. The homes are 4-bedroom and provide much needed family housing. The previously approved drawings showed a terrace approximately 1.6 metres above ground level, including steps, which is similar to what has been built on site. The terrace height is virtually the same as number 29, which you should have been able to see on site. This has been an exceptionally challenging site to develop. However, the principle of development for 3 detached dwellings has already been established through previous planning permissions. Despite the challenges encountered, we have consistently sought to work constructively with all parties and have gone above and beyond to accommodate neighbours' concerns wherever reasonably possible. The prolonged process has placed considerable financial pressure on us as developers, but we remain committed that we have delivered a high-quality scheme that complies with the relevant planning considerations. The properties have been signed off by building control with final certificates, and so they are built to current building regs, meet the water efficiency calculations, and are of a high-quality standard. In summary, the development ridge heights are lower than the approved plans, positioned further from neighbours, delivers ecological benefits, incorporates sustainable technologies, provides appropriate drainage arrangements, supported the local economy and has transformed a derelict site into a high-quality residential development. For those reasons, I respectfully ask members to support this application.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you, and I should just explain that when the last changes to the public speaking scheme were made, the general questioning of a speaker by members of the committee was withdrawn, but a proviso was included to allow the chair of the committee to be able to ask questions to clarify matters of fact for the members that the members generally wanted clarifying. So on that basis, I do have a couple of questions for you. You referred a couple of times there to the reduction in height and the fact that the houses are further away from neighbouring. You refer to that as if that's deliberate rather than the unattended benefit of the mistakes. My first question is, when did you realise that the ground was steeper than your architects had said, and that what was built was not what had been approved?
There was a section drawing that had been approved that shows the stairs finishing in mid-air, and that's if you continued that line, it would be as built. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure someone should have spotted that before it came to approving it. So there was nothing then that you could correct because the land is as it is.
Yes.
There was a mistake on the drawing. And my other comment is, there seem to be so many, I mean, you said something earlier that something's similar to what was at 29. There seem to be so many changes that you've had to come for a retrospective permission because there have been so many changes. And I know film has been put on the glazed units now, but originally that was supposed to be built with glazed units. So I'm just wondering what your attitude was to the conditions, because you haven't sort of met them and you've now come back with a retrospective because so many things were changed.
I think obviously the neighbours have consistently complained, and that is why we've ended up in this position. The terrace, the orientation of the steps changed. Originally they were going directly into the garden and protruding further out, and we changed the orientation sideways. We've put screening as well, but we thought that was actually better than the stairs going further into the garden and more overlooking. We dropped the driveways 2 foot. We made them steeper so that the overall height was lower, the ridge heights.
Thank you. As I say, Councillor Delaney is not here, but Councillor Clark, who is the other ward councillor, wishes to speak. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think this is about the 5th or 6th planning meeting I've attended regarding this development. Originally, there was only one dwelling on the site, which was part demolished and was undeveloped for many, many years. One of the issues we struggled with was the displacement of the badgers on the site, which I'm still not very happy about. I feel 3 dwellings on the site was too many. The houses are far too close together. They're so close together, they've had to cut down the standard size gate to get a gate between each property. The roof heights, as we said, are much higher than was expected. Another thing I can't believe is that they've ended up with black roof tiles, which there are no adjoining property with black roof tiles. Most have got Sussex clay tiles, which would have been probably expensive, but would have looked a lot better. I'm not 100% convinced that it's not an issue of invasion of privacy on 4 Bishop's Walk, because if you're from a height looking down on a property, you may not be able to see the bedroom windows, but you certainly overlook their back garden if they're sitting out there. I can understand the developer wanting to maximise the investment on the site, but I think 2 dwellings would have been much more acceptable. We've been hamstrung because the trouble is this site was given planning permission many, many years ago, subject to conditions. These conditions have been amended, deferred and challenged for many years by local residents. The houses will not help the need for local residents' housing. They are very, very expensive. They do not blend in with the local environment, and I've received so many complaints from local residents. The mistakes that were made with this application should have been resolved earlier. Not happy how it is resolved in this report. And the other thing is, as the applicant said, oh, well, the neighbours kept pushing us about various things. Well, neighbours have every right to complain and draw to the attention of the planning officers anything they feel is not being met in the planning conditions. So, you know, don't blame the residents or the neighbours for trying to make sure that it's built correctly and properly. Now, members have visited the site, so they will understand the comments I've made. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Members now have an opportunity to ask questions of Edwin. Just a reminder, this is question time, not discussion time. Members should resist any temptation to express views or begin the debate until we've all had an opportunity to question the officer. Anyone got a question for Edwin? Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I just wonder if Edwin could somehow let us look at the roof line, because when we visited the site I wasn't aware originally we were having hip roofs. We've now not got hip roofs, we've got verticals. Can we just see that and see what the impact is?
Matthew, if you could just load up the presentation, please. So the initial scheme for free detached, while Matthew's doing it, the initial scheme for free detached dwellings showed hipped roofs on the free detached dwellings. The second scheme was actually gable-ended roofs that were shown.
Thank you.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Edwin. I know none of us like retrospective applications. They're a nightmare for all of us. I'm just wondering, are our hands absolutely tied on this? What would happen if we don't approve this? What would the outcome then be?
If the application was refused for whatever reason, it'll be up then to the applicant to decide whether they could rectify whatever the reason for refusal related to, or alternatively, they could appeal against the refusal and it be determined by planning inspector.
Yes? Oh.
Sorry, you may not be able to answer this question, Edwin, but I was very concerned on the site visit to see the badger run at the bottom. It was entirely overgrown with brambles, and I'm really concerned that badgers would not like that habitat. Badgers are big creatures that, you know, like to forage, and I'm just wondering whether you happen to know whether any badgers have been seen on that site.
I'm not aware of, well, I've not seen any evidence that badgers have been seen on the site. I'm aware that we had a concern raised about a badger digging a hole in one of the gardens, I think possibly in January. So I'm aware of that in January. In terms of the actual management of the habitat area, there is a condition on the recommended, which is for landscape and ecological management plan for that area. So we will be able to approve details for that, for the maintenance and management of that area moving forward.
Councillor Barnes.
The badgers are seen weekly. The camera outside.
Sorry, I'm hearing voices to my left. Edwin, the condition about managing that land at the back, are we going to enforce that before the houses are occupied? Are we going to have a proper management agreement? And in particular, because I think it's quite important from the overlooking point of view, There is a very good silver birch tree there. Can we actually put a TPO on that as part of our decision?
So the application is retrospective. So in terms of landscape and ecological management plan, we've got a time limit of 3 months to submit those details to us and to be approved by us. If we don't receive anything, then we can obviously look at whatever enforcement action we need to take to ensure we have those details and they're approved. In relation to the silver birch, yeah, there is a case for it to be TPO'd, and that's in hand at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Stanger.
Thank you, Chair. If that scheme, not retrospectively, was coming forward today, how would officers rate its chances in its current form?
I could step in and say, I think that's asking a bit too much, or you could try and answer it if you want, because it's a hypothetical.
Would that come in today?
Because it is in today.
Yeah, but I know it is. Yeah,
it's
I know.
exactly the one we're discussing.
Just trying to see the difference between the approved scheme and the actual...
I think Matt's going to say something.
Yeah, it is important we consider the scheme today and have consideration to the planning history of the site. So all the permissions that have been granted are material in this instance. So it isn't fair to, if this came in as a standalone, because, hypothetical, we're not in that situation.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask the officer if he can confirm the difference between the front and rear heights of the buildings as built with the front and rear heights that have been approved, the highest ones in any prior application that have been approved. The reason I'm asking is because perhaps I misunderstood, and apologies if I did. I understood the applicant to be saying that the heights of the buildings match a prior approval, but that wasn't how I read the papers, and that's why I'm asking for clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a point of disagreement in terms of whether they're higher or lower than the buildings that have previously been approved in terms of between the council and the applicant. The report sets out in detail what the heights of the buildings that were approved. So the initial scheme for detached dwellings showed them at just over 6 metres high at the front and 8.7 metres high at the rear. The scheme that we've now got in front of us, the dwellings are up to 6.7 metres at the front and 8.2 metres at the rear. That's as measured now. The initial scheme, they were shown to be dug down by 900 millimetres. So in the report I've set out that actually when you compare them, there's probably an increase in height of about 37 centimetres. Yes.
Councillor Mrs. Barnes.
Yes, I hate these sort of applications because we're being handed something which possibly, if it was coming in new, we would not even be considering. Our first view of it was just showing how high those buildings are above the other roof lines taken from the top of the hill. My major concern actually is for the very narrow passageway that goes between the middle house and number 3. And I wonder if actually, although I gather that it is actually allowable, how on earth they're going to ever get anything like heavy garden bench, for example, into the garden at the back, because I couldn't, in my imagination, couldn't see that happening. I think the houses are very, very workmanlike, very well built, and I'm sure that it'll all work out. But we really shouldn't be looking at it from this point of view. It is such a shame. We are normally so concerned about street views. This does not conform to any street view, and I'm with Councillor Clark on that. I think the houses are lovely, but unfortunately, I think they're in the wrong place. Is how I read the whole thing.
Turning that into a question for Ed, I suspect we're saying are those gaps between
Yes, sorry,
detached houses
coming back.
acceptable?
Is that second, the gap between the second and third house really practical?
The only thing I'm concerned about is that the buildings have been, they've been approved under the building regulations, and that will include separation distances between the buildings being adequate for the building regulations. So from a planning point of view, we're happy with the separation distances.
Thank you. Are there any more? Yes, Councillor Barnes.
Although this trenches on a view, I think I'd better ask it as a question, because otherwise my comment won't be fully understood later on. I concerned, when I went up on the decking at the back of the right-hand one, looking at the front, I was very concerned that although the screen has been fitted according to the condition, there is very considerable overlooking of the garden of 33. I'm not sure what we can do about that in terms of the decking itself. I do wonder if it's possible to require some screening planting. And I simply would ask Edwin, is that feasible as a condition?
I think if members were minded to have additional planting provided, then we could look at including that on the condition. Yes.
I think it would be a useful condition because at the moment there is simply the fence there with actually a gap underneath. But the overlooking is really quite considerable, much more than I expected. From the other two houses, the overlooking is not substantial.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the officer before we move on to discussion? Okay, the matter's open for discussion. I'll start with one then. And I have to watch what I say. When I first saw the houses that had been built, because I used to drive down there a lot, I was horrified at the gap between the houses. Horrified that it wasn't actually a terrace, which would have made sense. And I think comment was made that the gates have had to be cut down because the gaps are so small. So I wonder how anyone's ever supposed to maintain the side of their house. But in answer to Councillor Gray's question earlier, this is part, of course, enforcement, and quite legitimately, part of enforcement is people can apply for retrospective authority for what has happened, and that's what's happened in this case, and it's quite legitimate and quite honest. We cannot use the planning system as a way of punishing people. That doesn't work that way. If we were to say no, apart from the appeal, etc., the enforcement would continue down its route. Ultimately, it could mean dismantling the houses, demolishing the houses, but that's ultimate. And actually, there's a whole range of things that could happen between then, and of course, we're in the middle of changing our enforcement policy anyway. So, I think, because I'm still torn on this one. The houses there have been built, and they're might be 37 centimetres higher, but they've been generally built to what we allowed or what we permitted, with some changes. Whilst I feel guilty myself that we ever allowed them, we did allow them, and what's been built is pretty close. So I don't see how we can actually say no, although I'm quite disappointed in that. Councillor Gray.
Yes, I do agree with what you've said, but my worry is we are setting a dangerous precedent. These conditions have been pretty much totally ignored. They could have come back much earlier as soon as they realised that they weren't able to meet the conditions, but to go ahead, build them completely and then come to us and say, please approve this now. Yes, our hands are tied, but what does this say to other developers? That's my worry.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
I must say, when I looked at them, the most obtrusive feature was in fact something we gave permission for, which are the slate roofs rather than the tiles. When I looked at the whole area, yes, there are some slate roofs, but the predominant roofs are actually in fact tile. So I think we made a mistake when we gave permission for that roof. I don't think the difference in height is sufficient in my mind to justify not granting retrospective planning permission. What worries me is, and it really is a worry, that the applicant has gone on making changes that they think are appropriate without any reference to the planning system. And somehow that actually has got to stop. I think we should remove permitted development rights because I don't think there is room for any further expansion on this site. So I think PDRs should go. I think we must enforce the conditions stringently this time and be prepared to take action to enforce those conditions. The one that concerns me most is the land that is not being managed for the badgers or for anybody else. It's been turned into a wilderness. And I think we need a strenuous management agreement on those 3 houses to manage that site for badgers. And I think, as I say, we need a TPO and some planting condition along the side of the garden of the right-hand house. All of those would, I think, improve the situation. There are 1 or 2 things which I think are an improvement. I think having the cycle stores under the decking is probably actually an improvement both from visual and indeed the where you would put those buildings. I think that would improve the frontage. So I think having storage under the decking is perfectly acceptable. And to my mind, the excess decking is not a major problem. So there are certain things which have been done which I think are actually an improvement. But I do think we must be sure that the remaining conditions are observed and that the applicant is made to realise that you can't simply play fast and loose with the planning system. But I have to say, I think we are not going to pull those houses down. I don't think it would be proportionate to make substantial changes, but I do think we need to put strenuous conditions about landscaping in place, and particularly the management of the Badger Reserve.
Thank you. Any other comments? No?
I'm really moving those as a tightening up of the recommendation. So I'm happy to move the recommendation with those amendments.
So, for clarification, in terms of conditions, I heard your wish to add 2. So 1 to do with boundary planting, reason being to help.
When you look down from the decking,
yeah,
on the right-hand side of the decking, the fence is quite adequate. Mm-hmm. As you move over to the left, because of the levels, that garden suddenly opens up totally, and it's totally visible from the decking.
Okay,
I
so
think some planting along that boundary to help screen that garden would be a useful condition.
so one of the side boundaries.
Yeah, can I just ask, Ed, do you know, are we talking number 29 or 31B? Do you know?
We're talking about number 33.
31B. Okay. I'm between that and 33. Yeah,
Correct.
So that's one. Second, removal of permitted development rights. And just for a bit of clarity, is that all extensions and alterations and outbuildings?
There are no outbuildings at the moment. The gardens really won't take many outbuildings. I think PDRs should go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the outbuilding's already conditioned not to be there.
Sorry, Chair, we have conditions on the report already. So one, condition 11 talks about no enlargement of any part of a dwelling without a further planning permission. Condition 12 talks about no garages, building, structure or erection of any kind shall be provided on the land without another planning permission. And then there's also a condition regarding windows not being inserted into side elevations. So I think we probably have that covered already.
Can I just clarify, are you thinking condition 11 covers permitted development that Councillor Barnes was suggesting? And then I think there's a discussion behind me on the legal.
I'm happy to leave that to the officers to settle how that is best enforced. I think actually PDRs can be exploited and shouldn't be.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just having a little discussion about what is removed already, and we think, yeah, extensions, roof alterations like dormers would be appropriate. I think removing Class E in terms of outbuildings, so small sheds and things like that in the rear garden would be unreasonable, given the locality. All the surrounding buildings will be allowed to build sheds and things you would expect in a back garden. So officers don't feel there's justification for removal of Class E rights.
I'm happy to jump in there. We have got that condition on there about removal of
including Class E. Okay, excuse me. I thought
it was on. It was
excluded.
It carries on from the previous permissions that were granted, and
okay.
Okay, thank you. And to carry on with your thought, you were then going on to the management of the Badger area, how we can condition that.
We have a detailed landscape and ecological management plan that's a condition in the report that covers all those issues.
Within 3 months, I think.
Within 3 months, yeah.
Thank you. And then the TPO for the Silver Birch.
The purpose of the management should be to facilitate conditions for the badgers.
I think that's worth saying. I mean, it's implicit in the need for a plan, but I think it's worth being explicit that it is to benefit the badgers.
Yes, yeah, we can do that. I mean, as it reads at the moment, it's a landscape and ecological management plan for the Badger Biodiversity Habitat Area. So I think it's probably okay as it is.
And I think you hinted that it might already be a TPO in the works somewhere, rather than specifically a condition for this.
The matter has been raised, yeah, but not as a condition of this.
Thank you. So Councillor Barnes at the moment has moved that. Councillor Mrs. Barnes, I can see the cogs turning.
Very observant of you. From what I saw, the amount of living space on the balcony potentially is much greater than the amount of enjoyment that you would get from the garden. One of the problems is if that number 3 can be seen from the balcony, so can any noise be heard. And I just wondered if there was anything in planning that would put a restriction on noise coming from the balcony to further upset the occupiers of the house.
I'll answer that. I don't think it would be, thank you for raising that, Councillor. I don't think it would be appropriate. This is a built-up residential area. There's lots of dwellings side by side and in close proximity to each other, so I don't think we would be able to do that. It wouldn't be reasonable.
Environmental health has certain powers.
If it was consistent and persistent, yeah. Right, so Councillor Barnes has moved acceptance of the recommendation to grant planning permission with those additional conditions. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Chowdhury. We now enter the bit we changed before. Now we can only speak once on the matter, but does anyone want to talk about that motion? That motion is now open for debate. Read the room. Right. In that case then, I'm going to move to a vote on the motion that planning permission is granted with those additional conditions that Councillor Barnes has had added. All those in favour, please show. That's 5. All those against? 2. That is carried. Thank you. Right, moving on now to agenda item 8, which is application RR/2023/1721/P, Rosewood Park, land north of Bexhill. The proposal, I'll leave Matt to explain the intricacies of this proposal, but as written, it is outline planning permission with application with all matters reserved access for the erection of up to 340 residential dwellings, including affordable housing, commercial unit, retail, community facility, use under Class EF, public open space, landscaping and sustainable drainage systems, and vehicular access points. It's recommended that it be resolved to grant outline planning permission, delegated to the head of planning to allow for the finalisation of conditions and to the completion of a Section 106 obligation to secure the following. And I'm not going to go through that list because that list is affected by what we're talking about today. And in fact, it's a change in one of those, Section 106. So it is subject to the public speaking scheme. So before members ask the questions, we will hear from Mr James Corley and Councillor Winter, the ward councillor, before we ask questions of the officer. The officer in the case is Matt Worsley, and the reason for committee consideration is it's an amendment to the proposed Section 106 head of term with financial implications when compared to the proposed heads of terms presented to the Plan Committee in June 2025. So we are not rediscussing the whole of the outline planning permission. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Outline planning permission was granted at June 2025 Planning Committee. The report to this committee is not a chance to reconsider the proposal as a whole. We are re-reporting as there is a necessary change to the terms of the Section 106 to ensure the provisions are in line with what was originally requested from East Sussex County Highways. Authority. The report before you at the June 2025 Planning Committee in the recommendation did not provide the required flexibility. Within the recommendation, one of the terms of the 106 was that a higher DDTR payment was required. DDRT is Digital Demand Responsive Transport. And yeah, there was one of the terms was for £600,000 to be paid for that, which was partly correct and in line with the Highway Authority comments. However, they said that if another development started within Bexhill, the Friars Way scheme, and payment was made to the DDRT, then a lesser amount could be paid on this scheme. And that's what was not included within the terms of the 106, hence why we're reporting now, as development has commenced on the Friars Way scheme. They have paid £300,000 on the DDRT, which means the second option for this development is now appropriate. And also with DDRT being provided, there's no requirement for a standalone school bus payment as well. So that's been removed. And that is why we're reporting it to you. That's the only amendment that is proposed. The way it's presented in the report with recommendation, grant, outline, delegated, it's just the way we have to report it. All of that is explained in the report, but obviously I can clarify matters if you have any queries. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to the public speaking. We'll hear from James Crawley, who is speaking against the application. As with all speakers, you've got the 5 minutes and you shouldn't introduce new information at this stage. Good morning.
Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is James Crawley. I've been a resident of Rosewood Park since the development was built. I also serve on the board of Rosewood Park Management Company, and today I'm representing hundreds of Rosewood Park residents who have jointly funded a formal written legal opinion from an experienced barrister at Maitland Chambers regarding this application. That opinion concludes there's a greater than 50% prospect of success should legal proceedings be necessary, and residents are prepared to seek an injunction through the High Court to prevent the proposed development if this matter cannot be resolved properly. I want to be absolutely clear, residents are not opposed to new housing. We recognise the need for additional homes in Rother. However, new development must be delivered lawfully, with the necessary infrastructure in place and with an access solution that is both practical and legally compliant. The first issue concerns the proposed route. The land Gladman proposed to use for construction, the main access road, is not simply an undeveloped field. It is the well-used principal public open space recreation area and children's play area, serving Rosewood Park and Little Common residents. More importantly, that land is protected by a covenant contained within the Rosewood Park Section 106 agreement. That covenant restricts the use of the land to recreation and associated purposes. It does not permit the construction of a road through it. Until a formal planning application is submitted to vary or remove that covenant, considered by this committee and lawfully approved, the proposed access route cannot proceed. That means that significant elements of the application before you today are premature because they rely upon land which is legally protected for another purpose. Unfortunately, the committee was not made aware of that covenant before determining the previous application. Nor was the email sent by Gladman to the senior planning officer during the previous committee meeting, confirming they were willing to remove the access element of the application, shared with members before they voted, except with the acting chairman of the planning committee, who then recused himself from the vote despite being one of the ward councillors for St Mark's ward. Residents consider those omissions to be significant, and they will form part of a formal complaint to the local government and social care ombudsman regarding the handling of this application. Secondly, I'd like to address the status of the recreation land itself. Although Barratt Redrow, whom Gladman are a subsidiary of, currently retains ownership, this land forms part of the existing Rosewood Park development. It was a key feature used to market the estate and has been maintained for years at residents' expense through the management charges. Residents have contributed approximately $60,000 towards its upkeep. It should have been transferred to the management company years ago on completion of the last property built. That transfer has still not taken place. The application before you redraws the boundary of the proposed development so that it contains the protected recreation space, despite the unresolved legal position surrounding its use. Until a formal planning application, which is required under current planning regulations, is submitted and considered by this committee, the majority of the items proposed in this application just cannot be considered. Finally, I'd like to briefly address transport. I believe Councillor Winter will cover the wider highways and infrastructure concerns, but from the perspective of Rosewood Park residents, the transport strategy document submitted contains significant factual inaccuracies. For example, it states that Stowe Drive, which is the main access road to the proposed development, has been widened to the required 5.5 metres to accommodate construction traffic. It has not. Residents have independently measured the carriageway at multiple locations, and the width varies between 5.5 metres and just 4.68 metres. There is no realistic opportunity to widen the road further. Existing residential properties immediately adjacent to the carriageway, while tree preservation order protected trees impose additional constraints that make further widening impractical and prevent the required 15-metre clearance from these trees to construct the road. Quite simply, the access route shown within the application cannot physically be delivered within the available land. Secondly, there is no suitable solution for contractor parking and nowhere available to establish parking within Rosewood Park. We experienced significant congestion, obstruction and dangerous driving during the recent, much smaller Churchill Living development on Barnhorn Road, the A259, when contractors attempted to park throughout Rosewood Park. A development of this scale would inevitably create substantially greater disruption for years. Members, this is not an objection to the development. It's an objection to an application that relies on land which cannot presently be used for its intended purpose, contains inaccuracies within its supporting evidence, and leaves fundamental legal and practical issues unresolved. I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application, or at the very least defer it until these matters have been properly addressed through the correct legal and planning processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawley. I'm just going to make a personal comment. It's given me a lot to think about that I didn't know. So thank you very much. Thank you. They're not allowed to ask questions, and I haven't got any on their behalf. Thank you. We now hear from Councillor Winter, one of the ward councillors. Councillor Winter.
Thank you, Chair. When this application was determined previously, members undertook the planning exercise required of them. You balanced the benefits of delivering approximately 340 dwellings against the impacts that development would inevitably generate. Your conclusion was that those impacts could be made acceptable because they would be mitigated through a comprehensive package of obligations secured by the Section 106 agreement. That planning balance is the foundation of today's debate. The issue before you is not whether the development should proceed. The issue is whether mitigation previously considered necessary to make that development acceptable should now be reduced. In my respectful submission, the evidence before you does not justify the conclusion. The statutory framework remains unchanged. Under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, planning obligations exist to secure measures necessary to make development acceptable in planning terms. Regulation 122 of the Community Infrastructure Levy Regulations provide that such obligations must be necessary, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind. When this committee resolved to grant permission, it accepted that these sustainable transport obligations satisfied those statutory tests. Nothing before you demonstrates that those tests are no longer met. Indeed, the development itself remains as it was when you considered it, approximately 340 dwellings, the same transport demand, the same pressure upon local infrastructure, the same requirements of sustainable transport. The only material change is the contribution now sought from the developer. That, in my view, is a distinction members should approach with considerable caution. I also have significant concerns regarding the robustness of the transport evidence. The submitted transport assessment continues to rely upon 2011 census journey to work data. That evidence is now well over a decade old. Since then, the 2021 census recorded an 18.3% increase in the population of St Mark's Ward, compared with a national increase of approximately 6.7%. Rosewood itself was largely unoccupied when the census was undertaken and has since introduced hundreds of additional residents into the local transport network. Yet members are being asked to reduce transport mitigation without the benefit of an updated evidence base reflecting those changes. The assessment also relies upon comparison with another site in Bexhill. With respect, that is not a comparable location. This site benefits from materially different accessibility to services, employment opportunities and public transport. It is therefore essential that each site is considered separately and assessed on its own planning merits. Conflating the two would disregard the fundamental differences in their locational characteristics and the distinct planning considerations that arise in each case. If mitigation is to be reduced, that decision should rest upon contemporary, site-specific evidence, not historic assumptions derived from a fundamentally different location. The practical reality of the site also deserves careful consideration. The Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation's recognised guidance identifies around 400 metres as the preferred walking distance to public transport. The nearest existing public bus stop from the centre of the proposed development is approximately 1.14 kilometres away. This development therefore sits almost 3 times beyond that accepted walking distance. That inevitably weakens the proposition that sustainable transport provides a realistic alternative to private vehicle use. Members are further invited to place reliance upon future cycling infrastructure. However, the original Rosewood permission in 2014 contained commitments relating to cycle parking and storage which were never delivered. That history is directly relevant. It is entirely legitimate for members to ask what confidence they can properly place in similar commitments being delivered this time. Finally, I wish to draw your attention to section 1.3.1 of the committee report itself. It expressly states that the developer may recover these transport costs through an annual levy of approximately £340 per dwelling. That is important because it demonstrates that this contribution is not necessarily a permanent cost to the developer. A Section 106 obligation is not a concession from a developer. It is a legal mechanism by which the impacts of development are mitigated. If those impacts remain unchanged, the justification for reducing that mitigation must be compelling. With respect, I do not believe that justification has been demonstrated today. The Highways Authority originally advised that there was little prospect of a digital demand responsive transport service being financially sustainable without these contributions. It was on that professional advice that this committee concluded that the Section 106 obligations were necessary to make this development acceptable. I recognise that funding mechanisms have since changed, but the planning impacts have not. This development still delivers 340 homes, it still generates the same transport demand, and it still places the same pressure on local infrastructure. The only thing that has changed is the level of mitigation. I therefore ask you to uphold the planning balance you reached previously and reject this amendment.
Thank you. I wish I hadn't told you you had 5 minutes instead of 3 now. You did the whole lot. Right, thank you, Councillor Winter. Right, the matter is now open for questions to Matt. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I really want to, and it's probably more for Paula than Matt, the whole legality of what we did last year, and I wasn't a member of the committee on that occasion, but I was present, is being challenged by the CPRE because we have not done an appropriate assessment. We raised questions about the access which the developer was going to go away and think about because, and it's relevant to today's debate, because if this is going to be a predominantly car-using population, then actually that will be extremely problematic for the access onto Barnhorn Road. I really would want reassurance that the legality of our planning permission last year is unchallengeable in the court. Because if not, I will certainly be going for the maximum of mitigation of traffic movements.
I'll come to Paul. I was going to say that the comments made from Mr. Crawley seem to think that it's likely to be challenged and there's a good chance of success. So I think that may well be in the pipeline, from what I understand. Paula.
The application was approved by the committee previously, and the committee report had some errors in it regarding the contributions required. And this application today is just to correct what is being required. It's not reducing the amount. It's the original committee report didn't set out correctly what the County Council required. So this report correctly sets it out, but in addition, the County Council have said that the Flexibus contribution of £57,000 is no longer required. And so this application today is not an application for the whole development or to consider the principle of the development or any issues regarding highways or access. It's actually just to get the committee, to have the committee to agree to this new resolution, and the resolution is only just to amend the terms of the 106. But there is no reduction of the overall highways contribution except for the Flexibus contribution.
So am I right in thinking the answer to Councillor Barnes' question is the legality is open to challenge, because it's not what we've been asked for today, and that's totally separate today, but the legality of what we decided last time, and I'm taking particularly Mr. Crawley's points, seems to be open to challenge and probably should be challenged. But that isn't what we're discussing today. It is unfortunately this very minor change in the wording, which is why last time I think Mr. Worsley wanted to just verbally update the committee, because the way this is set out sets hairs running again, thinking we're redebating the whole planning permission, which is not the case, which is really, really confusing. But I think from your question, I think the legality has to be tested.
I don't want to blunder. I wouldn't want Rother to blunder into tacitly approving what was done last year if it's illegal. That said, it's relevant because if the access is not going to be modified, then I want to minimise car movements as far as possible. Paula said something very important. She said the overall sum is not going to be reduced. That was not how I read it, so can Matt clear that up?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's useful to turn to page 32 of the report, and I've directly quoted the Highway Authority comments from prior to the previous committee. And you'll see, number one, requires this £690,000 contribution. Or two, in the event that the consented development proposal at Friars Way comes forward before this site, which it has, this would provide an opportunity to use the DDRT service contribution secured as part of that development to jointly fund a service for both that and the Rosewood site. It goes on and it says the appropriate contribution in that case, which is the case we've got today, is 486,200 based on 340 dwellings. Continues if if we are getting these DDRT contributions, then the contribution for the school bus service would not be required because the DDRT would serve that.
Yes, can I ask a bit about the evidence for that? Because a DDRT service is not going to supply a bespoke school bus service. How far away is the nearest school?
I haven't got exact distances before me. I mean, you've got Little Common Primary School.
Yes. Who have we consulted about the bespoke school bus service? And its unnecessary nature. Highways are not experts on school buses. I speak as somebody who actually knows quite a lot about school buses. I was chairman of education for several years.
This is the advice from East Sussex Highways.
By what right do highways pronounce on school bus transport? That is for the education authority.
It is. I'm going to come to that in the comments because I agree very much with that. But even with the school, but it's highways doing what they do quite often, which is straying into other things because they don't supply the bus service. They just want the money. Thank you very much. Although here they're saying they don't want the money if they've got the other money. But whether or not there's a bespoke school bus service is not a matter for highways. It's a matter for East Sussex County Council and the Education Department, not the Highways Department. So I do find that quite strange, but I think we'll come on to that in the discussion time because I've got a feeling, no, I won't anticipate, but we might be deferring this. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. Matt, can I ask you about this information we've had from CPRE? I'm sure we've all read their letter. They are asking us, oh, you haven't? Well, they are asking us to adjourn this until the officers' reports have been disclosed. They are saying that there is an environment report that did not agree with the previous application because of the threat to the Pevensey levels and the Ramsar site. And they are saying that this was not disclosed. I'm sorry you haven't seen this. I thought everyone...
Well, when was this? When did you receive this?
I received this on Tuesday.
This week, so
This
beyond
week.
the deadline for submission, isn't it?
Yeah, just to clarify, you are told, members, that if you receive any information after 9 a.m. on the Monday preceding the meeting, you shouldn't be considering that information at all.
I'm not sure if there was an earlier letter. I'm just looking at that one that gave more information on the Tuesday.
Yeah, I've just looked, I didn't notice it. The original message was Sunday, and then subsequent information was added Tuesday, twice on Tuesday. But the original suggestion was that the CPRE Sussex had objected, and this person was submitting their objection. But then they've added to it, but they submitted it Sunday. I missed it, and of course the annoying thing is they've sent it to all the members. They haven't sent it to planning or even to democratic services, so Julie could have sent it to planning. So Matt is totally unsighted on this, which is a problem, but yeah, not sure how to go
Sorry,
about that one.
can I ask a relevant question. What harm would it do if we deferred this pending the acquisition of further information about the requirements for a school bus service? Would the delay cause any harm to anybody?
Stop me if I'm going wrong, please. The access road, the appropriate assessment, CPAR, I take them very seriously, and there'd be every reason, I think, to defer to find that information. But does that information stop us, or that lack of information stop us doing what we're being asked to do today? And this is the confusing thing, that we're being asked to approve one little change in the financial bit, but what's been brought up are things that question the whole application, and I'm not sure, other than inviting people to go for a JR to make us look at it again, I'm not sure we can defer it for the reasons you want to defer it. But I think they're just discussing that behind me.
My reason, if you listen to my question, Chairman, was not to defer it for anything to do with the other questions. I simply would want, actually, to be assured that the case for having a permanent bus service has been looked at and it is not required. Because what this does is take away a regular school transport. And it's done on the basis of, as far as I can see, no evidence, only an assurance from Highways that the money from the Friars Way development will actually meet the cost. I am not convinced. And I certainly don't think I'm prepared to take a decision on this today. I'm asking it for to be deferred for a full report on the school bus service.
And also to add what just came to me then, is if there was a dedicated bus service, are they proposing it drives through Rosewood 1 and doesn't pick up a single child, and it's only going to go to the far one? Because that's ridiculous. So there's either a dedicated school bus service or there isn't, for that whole list, what may become even bigger. Councillor Stanger, and then we'll come to see what they've decided behind me.
Yeah, I understand that it's coming across as, it's explained as a minor adjustment, but is this is materially fundamental to actually development continuing, isn't it? Or it's beginning, this 106? Without this being agreed, the whole development, everything's at a jam, is it? So I understand it's small changes to the 106, but this is fundamental to continue with the development.
I mean, outline planning permission has been granted with, and it was delegated to sort out the 106, these payments. So it could revert to that, but it wouldn't be in line with what Highways previously advised. It really is. It is extremely narrow. What is being considered today in terms of the Highway Authority contribution, DDRT.
Would you agree with anything that Councillor Barnes said about regarding the school bus service? Do you think that brings anything into it?
Well, Highway Authority, I appreciate there is disagreement here, but Highways Authority advise on highway safety, sustainable transport solutions. That they have for other applications as well. It hasn't been raised as an issue before, this issue that I'm aware of. We've had contributions for DDRT on other schemes considered on large sites.
I'm not querying the
School bus.
DDRT. I'm querying whether a flexible bus service can meet the requirements of pupils who have a statutory right to transport if they live more than 2 miles from their primary school or more than 3 miles from their secondary school. There is no evidence in front of us that the Highways Authority has or can commission that kind of school transport using a DDRT service. And I really think we need to, given other problems with the state, we don't want people driving their pupils to school. We need to make sure the statutory requirement for school transport can be met.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes, because the other thing that came into my brain, I mean, I don't remember ever discussing a school bus service in any other application we've ever had before this committee. This is news to me, and I will go back to, we're into discussion. No, sorry, have you got a question? Let me discuss.
I do have a question. I've been listening very carefully to what Councillor Barnes has said. I just would like us to take a look at the final paragraph of 1.3, which says, if an additional bespoke school bus service is required, blah, 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 this would be covered by the DDRT. So does that contrast with what Councillor Barnes is saying? Because it implies that there can be a bespoke school bus service within the DDRT that we're being asked to approve.
Sorry, Councillor, could you repeat the question?
Good question.
Yeah, so I'm looking on page 32 at the final paragraph of 1.3.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at or, okay, so this is, the number 2. And the final paragraph of that states, if an additional bespoke school bus service is required, this would cost in the region of £50,000 per annum. However, the intention is that the DDRT will cover any secondary school travel requirement. So do I read that as saying that the DDRT does not cover an additional bespoke school bus service? Is it saying that that the DDRT will supply any school bus transport needs through another means other than a bespoke school bus service? I'm just really asking for help with my understanding of this wording.
Right. So this is the wording from the Highway Authority comments, their official consultation response. I take it as that the DDRT would provide for secondary school transport requirements, and therefore the contribution of £57,000 wouldn't be required.
It's not really the money I'm asking about. It's what, but maybe everybody else gets it, and forgive me if they do. I'm asking about, does this say either that the DDRT may cover an additional bespoke school bus service, or does it say that it will not, because it won't be necessary?
And I don't think you're reading too much into it. I think we're going to need to ask Highways what they mean, because that implies that the DDRT will cover, but how do they know how many kids are going to be there? And
I mean, in case it's unclear, the background to my question is that I'm 100% with Councillor Barnes here, that, you know, the need for a bespoke school bus service must absolutely be researched, understood and provided as required.
One moment, Councillor Barnes. Okay, back in the room. Yes, Councillor Barnes.
I'm not sure what the current calculation would be, but roughly 0.2 of a child per house is what we used to work on. I'm looking at the extremely convoluted road pattern in this, in the development and in the development to the east of it. I'm not sure what the road pattern will be in the outline, but we know it's going to be 340 houses. Are we going to be absolutely sure that all those houses are within the 2-mile walking distance? Or are they going to require primary school transport? The only mention that highways are making is secondary school, which is 3 miles. I haven't checked, but I think I would advise checking that somebody, if we're not going to create a problem, needs to check the distance from Little Common to the furthest point of this estate.
I'm going to ask if there's any more questions because I'm dying to make comments. Are there any more questions of the officer? Right, the matter's open for discussion, and I very much take Councillor Barnes and Councillor McLaren's point, and just thinking about what we've been asked here was, for example, to halve the contribution to the DDRT because Friars Way started. But I don't remember any reference to a bus service for Friars Way. So there's going to be a DDRT serving 2 estates now, which supposedly will cover the school transport as well because they don't need the school transport. And I'm not quite sure where they put in the 57,000 figure per annum for the bespoke bus service because I don't know, do they expect the developers to pay £57,000 a year ad infinitum to cover a bus? I think we're going to need to end up deferring this to have highways explain in much more detail what they're getting at. And I've just seen my vitiligo, I hate it. Right. Councillor Stanger.
Yeah, I think, I'd second Councillor Barnes' deferral if necessary, because to clear it up, because you could read them semantics, they read different ways.
Yeah,
I've just measured.
That having been moved and seconded, we're now limited to one comment, and my one comment is going to be, and I mean, when I took over chair, if you remember the first 2 meetings we had to discuss things that come back to us for judicial review. So although the deferring is dealing with the very narrow point that we're being asked to decide today, I would expect something legally to appear sometime because of the very legitimate concerns that Mr. Crawley and others have brought up, but it's not in our remit to do anything about what they brought up.
You've deliberately moved on very narrow ground.
Yes,
However,
absolutely.
The fact that a deferral, if we agree it takes place, will allow an opportunity for other questions to be asked in other places.
Absolutely. We're on the same wavelength there. So, anyone else want to contribute before I go to vote on it? So, it's to defer this matter to allow specifically highways to explain their proposals, re the bespoke bus service and the DDRT, and how they work together.
And it's a bit more than that, Chairman.
Yeah, that's what
I would want them also to explore how many houses are likely to lie beyond a 2-mile walking distance to Little Common. Because without that information, I can't judge whether a bespoke primary school service is also going to be.
And whilst I would say, again, it's my word of the day, whilst I'm thinking that's implicit in come back and explain why I think it's right that we explicitly say, because they only reference secondary school, they do not mention primary school in their response. It's as if it doesn't exist. Councillor Stanger.
Just from Matthew, did they normally do a school transport assessment today? I know highways agreed to highways, but how do education authority judge sites? Or there must be do they have to do a school transport assessment for the site based on, how do they get to that?
I have seen a pedometer actually used and a wheel. A parent has a right to request that.
I've given Matthew a little bit more thinking time. I was expecting the answer. The ways of the highways department are unknown to me. Councillor Mrs. Budd.
Can I therefore ask you, if this amendment is approved, that this comes back to this committee and isn't decided by officers who are satisfied with the response?
Yes.
My understanding is that this is a deferment, and it is relating to a financial contribution, so we'll, in the terms of the scheme of delegation, we will need to report it back.
Might it be a good idea in that case if we actually list those things which we want considering?
Please do, yes. Right. Because I will, write to highways specifically with, committee deferred for these specific reasons. You must clarify your position on these matters. Yeah. And these will be reported in the minutes.
And it is a genuine clarification. This is not just a pretext.
No, I appreciate, I understand.
Do you need anything more specific than what Councillor Barnes and I have said about the bus service to DRIT, the distance people live from there to include the primary school? Do you think we've said enough for you to be able to pick out from the minutes what you want, or do you want us to carry on telling you what we think?
I'm happy with what has been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Barnes.
You'll probably rule it out because you'll say it's not relevant because you didn't know about it, but the appropriate assessment is important. And if that could also be the subject of some sort of investigation, that would be welcome too.
I would think that's also going to have to be done by somebody else outside this committee and this system to make us look at that again. And it may be that anyone else who's challenging something may incorporate that in their dealings. Matt?
It isn't part of the discussions today, but and I wasn't aware of the CPRE comments, still haven't seen a copy, but there was an appropriate assessment done. It's contained within the report that was sent in, put together for the June 2025 committee. Natural England were consulted, so I don't know the context, so I don't know what CPRE have said, or if there's a particular thing missing from the appropriate assessment, or
I'm reluctant to explore because that's not on our agenda today. But as far as I understand, we have not published it.
I will forward the emails that we all got to Matt so you can look at it. But as you say, specifically, that isn't on today. We've sort of resolved today, but there's a lot of unresolved things that are not within our remit today. Councillor Gray.
I have actually just forwarded it to you, Matt. That was the second letter of it, not the first. But they are saying that there were reports that weren't disclosed about the environment. So maybe while we're deferring, we could look at those. Yeah,
he's got nothing else to do. Yeah, obviously obviously that just as a general thing, because now Matt is aware, he will look at it and will consider it. But the motion before us then is to defer this specifically for the reasons that Councillor Barnes and I said. I'm not going to do them again because I might get them wrong and mess it up. We can look back at the minutes. All those in favour of deferring this matter, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you. We will now have a 20-minute break. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back to this month's Planning Committee meeting. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is application RR 2026/643/LBC. This is a listed building consent for 15 Terminus Road, Bexhill, TN 39 3LR, which is also the former Bexhill Station West. The proposal is repairs to the OG-shaped cupola and flat roof at the former station. The recommendation is that it be resolved to grant listed building consent. The case officer is Catherine White. The reason for it being here is it's council-owned building and the land. It's not subject to the public speaking scheme. And although Catherine is here, Matt will now present her report to the committee. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Bexhill West Railway Station is a Grade 2 listed building. Repair works are proposed, and this is specifically to the ogee-shaped cupola, and there's a photo of that at the end of the presentation which I will show you, together with a flat roof situated at the northern end of the building. There's been long-term water ingress on failed elements, which obviously is not good for the listed structure. And the repairs proposed are to rectify that. So they are looking to repair failed lead coverings and replace with new standing seam lead work to the ogee roof, new lead capping and flashings, the repair or replacement of rotten timber elements, removal of the parapet gutter and replacement with breathable membranes, and inspection and repair of ventilation box. Our conservation consultant has been involved in the process and is happy to support the works, subject subject to a condition to be in compliance with the submitted plans and details. They have, so on top of the heritage work, repairs to the historic fabric, they've also done ecology surveys to check for bats and birds. There was no evidence of bats found, but there will be a precautionary approach, of course, when doing works and anything reported as necessary. The roof plan before you shows the cupola to the right-hand side, which is, the tower-shaped building. The photo will show it better in a minute. So that's the aerial photography. Flat roof to the left in, dark material. And there's a close-up. I think you can see at the base some of the damage and why this work is necessary. So the recommendation is to grant, like I said, the submitted plans, which have lots of technical details on and details of the repairs. They're listed as approved plans documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Gray.
Thank you. This is really good news. I particularly love this building because I can see the clock tower from the back of my house. And I'm just wondering, are there any plans to repair the clock? I know that Bexhill Heritage did it some time ago, but it's not been working for many years. So it'd be wonderful to get the clock repaired at the same time, but probably very expensive.
Well, it's right twice a day.
We're not aware of any plans. It's certainly not proposed under this application.
I was going to say on this before. I was going to say, I don't know if you know this, but were Bexhill Heritage consulted? Did they put in an opinion on this? Are able to help us, because I'm sure they know a lot about the history, which the conservation officer may not. He may not know that's a very good source.
Approve what's being done. Then, if you look at the representations.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barnes.
I think my only question is about the flat roof, which is, of course, a late addition to the building. Was any consideration given to making that slightly slope so that you minimise water ingress? If not, next time this comes round, perhaps we should consider that, because at the moment, if we've had problems before, we're really building a problem in again if we're just reinstating.
Matt's just looking, I suspect they're just looking for like, which is because it's what's there, as opposed to improving the listed building. Yeah.
I haven't got that information in front of me, I'm afraid. Yeah.
It's probably irrelevant to giving permission.
Any other questions? Matters open for debate. Councillor Mrs. Barnes.
Just a quick ask, does it have any original fixings or fixtures or anything which also need to be preserved? I was thinking particularly of the ladies' restroom. What kind of facilities did they have, and are they still there?
I'm sure there's lots inside that need to be maintained, but this is specifically repairs to the roof and the because of the water ingress. But it'd be nice for something to happen to that building. Full stop. Be a great cinema. Oh, sorry, you said that. Yeah. Am I right in thinking this? We were only looking at the roof. They haven't suggested anything else.
Correct. That would be to consider it another time if there was an application to convert or something. We could look at what else was there at that time and.
So they say fix the roof first.
Yeah.
Yes, very important. Very important. Yes.
Matters open for discussion, or okay, I'll move because I don't do it very often. I move recommendation we give listed planning consent and seconded by Councillor Barnes. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 10 and we say goodbye to Councillor Creaser.
I was just tuning in. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Right, agenda item 10 is application RR 2026/0. I've got too many numbers here. 04586, it says here. How? It's 104 Udamore Road, Rye, TN31 7DY. Proposes erection of a previously approved single-storey rear extension approved under a previous application recladding of the first floor rear and erection of a front porch. The recommendation is it be resolved to grant full planning permission. The reason for it coming today is the applicant is related to a Rother District Council member who is also a member of this committee, which is why she's just gone. The application is not subject to the public speaking scheme, so the officer, in this case Catherine White, will now present a report. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. 104 Udimore Road is a two-storey residential dwelling situated on the southern side of the road within the development boundary for Rye. Next slide, please. The proposed development comprises the erection of the previously approved single-storey rear extension, recladding of the rear at first floor, and the erection of a front porch to the northern elevation of the dwelling. Next slide, please, Matt. In terms of the existing character of the area, nearby properties mostly comprise of two-storey residential dwellings with a varied appearance in terms of their overall design, external finishing materials and frontages. The proposed porch is of a modest scale and design, and therefore it has been considered subservient to the existing building from what I can see on the plans. Due to its positioning, it is unlikely to present unreasonable harm to neighbouring properties, and the cladding to the rear at first floor level would tie into that which was approved under the previous scheme. I
don't think you've got a lot more to tell us there. And less is more, thank you. Are there any questions for the officer, please? Matters open for discussion. I suspect there's going to be very little discussion. Therefore, Councillor Gray.
Move approval.
Well done. Seconded by Councillor Mrs Barnes. All those in favour of granting planning permission, please show. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Just one agenda item left, which is 11, which is to note, as is normal, there is no meeting in August. And the next site inspection date will be scheduled to take place on Tuesday the 15th of September, departing from the town hall at 9:30 if there are any. And then the next committee meeting, also at 9:30, will be on Thursday the 17th of September. That brings us to the end of this month's Planning Committee meeting. Thank you to everyone for their contributions, and goodbye to those watching online. Thank you.